Blessings, everyone, and welcome. So glad you're back with us again today. And my name's Marsha Jones Washington. If this is your first time here, or you're just catching me as you're flipping through, but I am the founder and facilitator of an online ministry called PA Women of Chaplaincy and Pastoral Care, which started back in 2022. So we're almost 4 years old. But I consider this space to be an extension of that, because here I am sitting down with a woman who is in chaplaincy or pastoral care, some form of ministry, and just allowing her to share a little bit about what she does in terms of serving the Lord. And so today is no different. And the thing of it is, in my last interview with someone, I had mentioned that this is March, which is Women's History Month, and that maybe I would, get to interview someone that's made history in some way. Well, the Lord brought someone into my path that I'm very excited about today. And she's someone who, she's a woman of first, I'm going to say. So we're going to be spending the next 30 minutes with the Reverend Dr. Paula Payne. Paula, how are you today?
I'm very fine. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and give God all the glory.
Yes, amen, amen. And so, as I said, I'm calling you like a woman of first. And also, I just want to mention you've given me permission to call you Paula. We had spoken a few weeks ago briefly, so I could get a little information on you.
That is
But
right.
so, yeah, I'm just very much a first name basis person. So I'm glad I can just call you Paula. So just want to get started with, you've accomplished a lot of things, but in terms of your military background, first of all, what was your attraction to the military, or what was it that, made you decide to look into joining the armed forces?
That is an excellent question. I was a teacher on St. Croix Virgin Islands, and I was off for the afternoon, and how God brings things into our life. When I was off, I saw a man in a military uniform, Air Force uniform, and my heart leaped. And then I ran over to him, and I said, is there a military base here? He said, yes, the Air National Guard. I said, well, what is that? And this was 1981. And he said, well, come on over to the airport and we'll tell you about it. Well, that was God's hook in my jaw to join the military. We have different ways of doing it. I went over there, and the commander in charge was telling me about the military, Air National Guard, Air Force Reserves, and active duty. And next thing I know, I had my hand raised, and I said, I'm going to do this. I've always been adventurous. I've always liked to travel, and this was a way for me to do that. And so I joined. And of course, I went to got basic training. I was enlisted at the time. And I traveled quite a bit, but I learned communications. That was my former thing. And then I moved and then the Lord put me I went to the National Guard Bureau. I moved from the Virgin Islands to Washington, D.C. And then the Lord moved me to the National Guard Bureau. And I was the first enlisted person in the Chief of Chaplain's office for the Air National Guard. Now, that was another movement from the Lord, and for the Air National Guard. And then you have the Air Force Reserve headquarters, and then you have active duty. Well, I was down the street from Bowling Air Force Base, where the Chief of Chaplains of the Air Force is. They trained me with everything. They trained me how to look at packages. They trained me about what it means to be endorsed by your denomination. They trained me about looking at things about academics, the seminaries that people graduate from. Do they have the proper? And so all of that helped me to become the full chaplain that I am in administration. So I moved from there, and then became an E6. Those persons that are out there in the military, that enlisted, and then you become an officer. I was an E6 before the Lord moved me into becoming an actual officer, a chaplain candidate. And so from the chaplain candidate, I became a chaplain. And in my denomination at the time, United Methodist, you have to be an elder before you become a full chaplain. I had to pastor for 3 years. I did. And so I became a chaplain, and I've been a chaplain. I retired. I've been everywhere, though. God blessed me. My most, all of them were very rewarding, but my most rewarding was being for the Wounded Warriors at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, where I worked with the families. And then the Lord moved me to be the supervisor at the at the at the hospital there, Balada Rock. I was a supervising chaplain, but we had to have CPE before coming there, and so I became their senior chaplain. And I saw a lot of casualties, deaths, and I helped with all, and to include the medical staff there, and that was a blessing, really. You work with ecumenical and the faith, some nuns, NONEs, no faith at all.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
You
Uh-huh.
learn how to navigate that. And then I moved from there to mortuary affairs at Dover Air Force Base. So those were the most significant. Not that none of the others were significant, but people think that when you're in the Air Guard or when you're reserves, you don't do like the active duty. That's not true. When you're good, they call you.
Yes.
And so I
Yes.
was called many times. I spent just as much time active duty that I did in the Air National Guard. I was senior chaplain there at Massachusetts National Guard. Okay, so then I moved from there, and then I retired in 2014. They gave me, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. However, and I was an 05. However, the Lord blessed me to become an 06, and I was the first woman in the state of Texas for the guard or state guard to become an 06 in my rank. And so that for the whole history of the state of Texas, and it's in writing, it's all out there. I retired 2014, and that's my story for military.
All right. Yeah, I was going to say, now you covered a lot there in that one answer to the one question. So some of those things I'm going to want to come back to. But I do want to touch upon the fact that your dad was a Tuskegee Airman. And
That's
so
right.
I'm just saying, with that, does that mean he was excited to hear that you were going to become, a part of the Air Force as well? Was he excited
That's
about
that's a great that's a great question. A lot of times Tuskegee Airmen came back, they didn't want to talk about their stories. My father was one of them. Okay. People think that a Tuskegee Airman is always a pilot. That's not true. Anybody that was in support of the pilots, you can't do anything in the air unless you have the support on the ground. It's like airlines today. If there are no mechanics, no people doing administrative stuff, nobody checking the boxes and all, the pilots can't get up off the ground. Okay, so my father was a procurement officer, and with the Tuskegee Airmen. So even if women were in there helping, they were called Tuskegee Airmen. So
that?
people want to eliminate that. No, everybody that was on the ground was called a Tuskegee Airman. Everybody in that community was a Tuskegee Airman. People need to know that. And so, yes, and so he found out that I was going to. He didn't talk about it much, but somebody else did and told us how crucial it was, as he was always encouraging people to stay in the military. And a month after he got out, that's when the armed forces was desegregated. A month after he got out. Okay, so
Mm.
so when I told him I was going to Iraq, he said, see, when we sign that contract in the military, we know that there's a chance that we're going to go to be merged with active duty. That's why Guard, Reserve, and active duty are all trained at the same schools, so that when a war does break out, we'll be equipped. Okay. So what happened is I had already signed that contract, and I renewed my contract many times to include enlisted time. And when I told him I was going to Iraq, he said, "Can't they send somebody else?" That's
Mm.
what he said. I said, "Daddy," he was in a nursing home at the time. I said, "Daddy, I signed a contract like everybody else. I'm no better than anybody else. God needs me to be there. And so I went, and it was very, it's a lot of experience. My father died while I was over there. Okay.
Mhm.
They flew the flag for my father on the entire base. Ain't that a blessing? That
Yeah.
same flag that was flown is on my back porch right now. I fly it today.
Mm,
Okay. Yeah, I fly that flag today, in remembrance of him. But he died. Um, I did not go back because it takes 5, 6 days to get there, and it may take 5 or 6 days. That's at the time to come back. So we held up for a memorial, did a memorial more when I returned. And as a chaplain, I was the only one that's clergy in my family. And I not only did the officiated my father's funeral, which was graveside, I did my mother's, I did my grandmother's, I did my aunt's. When you
mm,
know the people better than those persons that are clergy, if you can do it. And the Lord gave me the courage to do them all. But my father, we have on his graveside about him being a Tuskegee Airman and the North Chicago, and that's where I'm from. But I'm born in Waukegan, raised in North Chicago, Illinois. That's north of the city, Chicago. And at the VA, they have him acknowledged. He didn't even want to tell anybody, and he was a occupational therapist for veterans suffering from all kinds of, it could have been alcohol abuse, drug abuse. He was the occupational therapist. He had a master's degree in that. So, and they honored him. Okay. So that's what my father, yes, he was.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, and when I first heard, that story about how your dad was honored, I mean, there in Iraq, I mean, after he passed, but that just really touched me that they, did that, honored him in that way, and
Mhm.
I'm sure that had to be somewhat moving for you as well. Um, how did that impact you?
Yeah. It impacted me because this is a good thing. The same unit that I was with the medical team was the same unit number of the Tuskegee Airmen.
Mm, mm, wow.
They had the whole base, Balad, was the same number of the Tuskegee Airmen. And here I am, a product of that.
Mhm.
How about that, Lord, fixing that one?
Mm, mm,
So I didn't know that the Lord would put me at the same unit. They honored, and the Tuskegee Airmen came over too,
mhm,
for it was a tribute to them. Those who were left, the same unit that they named it behind the Tuskegee Airmen was was a unit that I was a part of, the medical team.
uh,
How about the guy doing that?
that is
It was the
powerful.
same number, and they gave them a tribute, and here I am. And then, of course, we broke ground at the Tuskegee Airmen Museum while I was in Montgomery, at the Maxwell Air Force Base. I was the first Air National Guard female chaplain to go to Air Command and Staff. Okay, the first one.
Mm, mhm,
And then we went to Moffett Field at Tuskegee to break ground for the new Tuskegee Airmen Museum. I was there. Now,
mm.
come on. God made it where I would be there at such a time as this.
Yes,
And
yes.
then I remained there for the whole year because I was going to school, Air Command and Staff. I remained there until the building was built, and I took part in the ceremony there. How about that? That's what God did for me. Okay.
Yes.
So this is how we know God, that the weaving of that thread is so amazing, and our God is great. Okay.
Mm, mm,
So I was there when they broke ground. I was in Iraq to be a part of the same numbered unit as my father was, Tuskegee Airman. I was only, uh, I was the only, I was a senior chaplain. Come on. So that's how that hit me. that, Lord, you not only am I, you placed me in the same numbered unit of the Tuskegee Airmen. You let me see the Tuskegee Airmen being honored while I was there, because
Mm,
they could have chose the date after I left. They could have chose a date before I left, but God chose that for me. You know what I'm saying?
mm.
Okay. Yep.
Wonderful, wonderful. And here's what I want you to share too, because I had asked you about this before. Growing up, you've already said your dad didn't even talk about his
No,
experiences. And
no.
so when did you begin to hear about the Tuskegee Airmen and what they accomplished? When did you
Very,
begin to hear some of those stories?
very good. When I was in basic training at Lackland Air Force Base, a part of the curriculum was to talk about the history of the different multi-ethnic groups that had an impact on the Air Force. And Tuskegee Airmen was one of the sections for the curriculum. And that's how I first learned about it. Okay. That's
So
mhm.
you're already an adult, like what, in your 20s?
I was 28 years old when I joined the Air Force.
All
Yes.
right, all right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's when you really just started to learn about the
Correct.
Tuskegee.
That's correct. That's correct. And it's just like when I was at on St. Croix, just innocently walking down the beach and all. And when he said it's the Air National Guard, and I said, "Well, what's that?"
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about it. I hadn't heard about it. And
Yeah.
so, and then when I went to see the commander, his recruiting, can I say, spiel was okay. Was very convincing. He knew how to market that thing. Okay. And everybody else was a Crucian, from St. Croix Crucians. And I was the only one from, they called it continental. I'm a continental person. You know what I'm saying? Even though the Virgin Islands is a territory. Okay. And so I wanted to be an officer first because I had a master's degree in education.
Mm,
And they claimed there was, to me, that was discrimination too. But they claimed there was nothing but enlisted. I said, okay, I'll go enlisted, not knowing that the Lord wanted me to come from the bottom to have a good story.
mhm,
And the headquarters of this unit was in Alabama. Come on.
mm,
And then Alabama was not allowing, especially Black women, to be officers. They
mm,
had no officer at the time. A Black woman. And when I told them I'd go and enlisted, oh yeah, she can be enlisted. But look what God did. He brought me through the water and took me to the Guard Bureau. And then a lady from Texas, I'm living on San Antonio, Texas at this time. People want to know where I live now. Brought me, she came and she said, you go to church 4 to 5 days a week. Everybody knows it. This was a Friday. We're gonna put you in the chief of chaplain's office on Monday. We do not have an enlisted person there. We need you to help the chaplain with administrative. Okay.
mhm.
And that's how the Lord did that. He placed me in the chief of chaplain's office of the Air National Guard, the Guard Bureau. Okay. And that's how, you know what I'm saying? And it's always something that when we reflect, people sitting on the fence out there listening to me, go on and listen to the Lord and do it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yes,
there's a
yes.
time, there's a time for everything, a time for us to move out, a time for us to stop putting it off. You know what I'm saying? There's a
Mm,
time for everything under heaven. And when we yield to the Lord, and then pray, he will respond in his own way. Come on.
amen, amen. And there was just so much there in what you just shared. But now in Alabama, you were saying once you were sent there, you couldn't become, at that time, you couldn't become, um, what was it? You were already enlisted, but you couldn't become
An officer.
an
Yes.
officer.
That's
Okay.
right. Because they claim that on their books, they didn't have any availabilities. But I knew that the folks in Alabama, there was plenty of availabilities. But
Mm,
guess what? Sometimes we have to go through these stages to see how God took us, to give God the glory in all things. So it was almost like he had to take me through, because guess what? If I was not enlisted, I would not have been in the chief of chaplain's office. They needed an enlisted person. You see, there's a reason and purpose for everything. They needed an enlisted person. And I was the one that God picked at the time, with humility, okay? Giving him the glory. He picked me to be that enlisted person for such a time as this, to work with the chief of chaplains, okay? And then next thing I know, they were putting me in a position of being a second lieutenant and a chaplain candidate. So the Alabama thing was just to come in to be enlisted.
Right.
And then the officer stuff came when I was in DC. Okay.
I
Yep.
see, I see. But yeah, what I was, going to try to get at is just the fact that was it the 1980s already in Alabama when this was happening? I'm just saying, we usually think about the civil rights and how, there was a lot of push or fight for things back in the 1960s, maybe the 70s. But I'm just saying this is further along than that period of time.
Right. Well, 1981, I enlisted. Okay. And we were under the Alabama unit. Okay. In Alabama. Then
Mm,
when I moved from St. Croix, after I taught 5 years on St. Croix, I taught 5 years. And then I moved back in 84 to, I went to St. Croix 79. So I was there 5 years. Then I moved, I felt the Lord moving me from the island, from the island back to the States. And so that's when I had to look for a unit, because I had to fulfill my 6-year contract. And then when I got to the DC Guard, the commander who was there, he retired as a 3-star, and he was there. And then he sent me to the Guard Bureau. Okay. And that's how I was no longer under Alabama. However, when I was a Major Payne, can you believe it? I hated to release that because I had too much fun with it. When I was a major, the general of the Massachusetts Guard, he said, "I'm sending you to Air Command and Staff." I said, "Sir, I'm in my 50s. I'm too old. Give it to somebody else." He said, "No, I'm sending you
mm,
to Air Command and Staff in Montgomery, Alabama, at Maxwell Air Force Base." So I couldn't believe it. That was the Lord opening the door for me to go further in my career, and not just learn in a microcosm, but more of a, what I'm saying, macrocosm of what the military is really all about. In a joint, I was entering the joint arena. So people in my class, in my little cohort, were Navy, Army, Coast Guard, they were everything. And people from other countries were in my cohort. So I learned about everything, how people merge. And when I hear things on TV, it's automatic with me. Get what I'm saying? And so
mm,
they taught me all that. And then I went to Air War College. Air War College is the top dog. Okay. We can't do that unless you do Air Command and Staff. So I didn't go in resident. I was in resident Air Command and Staff, but I did correspondence with Air War College, and it taught me more. So God really put me into an arena that allowed me to know more about the mechanics of military strategy, okay, and operations. So I even use that sometimes when I preach.
all right, all right. And listen, I do want to ask too, Paul, or have you address the fact that in reading across your like a mini bio of you, I saw that you were also the first woman to serve in several of your pastoral appointments in the 13 years when you were doing pastoral ministry. So again, you've touched upon you are ordained as a minister, and so you. I suppose in civilian life, let's say you were a pastor at times of some churches, and I just wondered, did you find any either one or the other more difficult? I'm just saying, did you find being serving in the military as a chaplain more difficult, or serving maybe as a civilian in church ministry, or not was neither of them that difficult for you? What would you say?
Okay, good. Okay, so pastoral identity to me is like it goes hand in hand, excuse me, with the chaplaincy. I think that your pastoral identity is kind of polished and honed in order to be a good chaplain. That's another reason why it's good that at the time when I was ordained United Methodist elder, it was a good strategy for them to get you some practice as a pastor for 3 years before you became a chaplain. Now, back to the question. I liked traveling. Okay. I like going outside the building. I'm more of a missionary outreach person or an ambassador for Christ. I pastored 13 years, but I felt, excuse me, I pastored for 13 years and I felt confined to the actual call that the Lord wanted me to fulfill. But being a pastor, you know the people and you can, be there with them, and that's your local, that's your little niche right there. But being a chaplain, it widens the net.
Yeah.
So to speak, it widens the net. I felt so fulfilled when I went on these deployments because I was out there representing Christ. I was representing Christ as I always called them and said, well, what would you call yourself? I said, I call myself an ambassador for Christ or a missionary for Christ because I went in different countries. Okay. I was actually not a missionary on the books, but I was a chaplain on the books, but you still do missionary work. Whereas when you're a pastor, of course, if I was a first woman pastor or first culturally cross-cultural pastor, what have you, I felt confined in my work. So, and in 2010, hold on, let me see when that was, 2009, I wrote a letter to the bishop saying, I'm going to go active duty. I no longer am, feel called to be a pastor in a church, in a local church. I want to do chaplaincy full time. And that's because I knew, because I felt constricted. Every time I returned from a deployment, I go back and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be out there in the world to spread the good news about Jesus Christ, and also to work with, and plus my thing is ecumenical interfaith is the challenge, that's my call, to work with people. And I mean, I work with everything, to include witches, everything, people who may not agree, but that doesn't mean I can't show them the love of Christ. The light, let the light shine, be the salt of the earth. And a lot of people can't do that. And that's when we find out that some people are not really cut out to be chaplains, because everything is all centered on their own stuff. That's okay in its place if you're a pastor in a church. But when you're a chaplain, when you get out there, you got to open up a little bit, or not only will they not like it, they won't like you either. And you won't be able to stay there and to do that. And let's call it like it is. Some people who can't find a pastorate, they say, I'm going to be a chaplain, and they really aren't cut out for it. They do it because they can't find a job. And all you're doing is hurting people. Because you can't find a job, you're going to be a pastor. No, I mean, going to be a chaplain. No, that God has to actually call you to be a chaplain. And that's so I've learned how to be dual-headed. Okay. I can, but in my denomination right now, I'm Global Methodist now. Okay. I'm global. And we started in 2022. It was born. And now I'm being called to, now they call me as an intentional interim pastor. Why I got that experience? Because I was a pastor for 13 years. So my experience in chaplaincy and also as a pastor makes that a solid pick. I interim when the bishop calls me or elder called me or whatever, I go in and that is my call, but I come out, I don't stay. But that experience as a pastor has helped with that stage in my life. Okay. All right. So that's how I hope that dual hat, but you got to know that you're called and how that the dual hatted and that pastoral identity helps too when you work with people by the bedside, whether it be a prison, at the jail, whether it be police, fire, volunteer, whatever it might be, that pastoral identity works with you. Okay. I hope I answered that question for you.
Yes, yes. And, Paul, as we begin to wrap up, I do just want to give you an opportunity to share a bit. You've already talked about how you are under the Global Methodist now, and you're retired, of course, from the military. So, what is it, that you are doing at this time? I believe you're a supervisor for CPE. So, why don't you
All
talk
right.
just.
I am, first of all, I have the doctorate in spiritual direction. That helps too. But I am a clinical pastoral education supervisor, educator candidate. Again, clinical pastoral education supervisor, educator candidate. I should be finished, God willing, in December. I have my own groups at this time. And I say that Lord is really putting the icing on the cake for me. I had my 4 units of CPE. I've had my interview to be board certified. It'll be coming up probably in a week. Okay. God is really doing a mighty thing right now in my life. So I should be finished with this training, certified by December, God willing, like I said. And then I want to help others. So what is my goal? What is my goal? My goal is to be an example to others, to help people learn more about who they are, and also about what it really means to be out there as a chaplain. Get what I'm saying? Um, but but also I hope to work in seminaries, in the seminary, CPE programs. But I'm telling you, the chaplaincy is exploding all across seminaries. When I went to seminary, we didn't have a specific chaplain program, And when I took CPE for the first time in 1989 at the NIH, National Institutes of Health, by the lady who was our supervisor for pastoral care, she recommended CPE. I didn't know what that was, and so she sent us out like field education. So my assignment for the year was the NIH. Okay, that was my assignment. I learned so much about myself and the things that were bothering me and how my friends, peers helped me. Okay, so that was my first, and then of course I took my 4 units, but that really blew the lid off the top of blew the lid off. And that was another way of God taking me through. So now I'm in the process of going through my education certification for CPE so that I can be a now back to this. I want to work with seminaries, or I can work with lay people in the churches to learn the proper protocol when it comes to visiting the sick. Come on now.
Mm,
Visiting, we need that. Visiting prisoners. Come on. We
yeah.
need that. A lot of people just walk in there and say, be healed in Jesus' name, and all this other stuff. When, we got to learn how to check ourselves at the door, you know, and let the Lord do it. Get what I'm saying? We can't fix nothing. Learn that we can't fix it. We can't fix it. But I like to work, I love working with lay people to learn what is the proper protocol here when it comes to visiting the sick. So that's what my goal is. Seminary, lay people, and working with clergy, if that's the case. So that's my goal.
Yes, well, let me tell you, Paula, I have interviewed a lot of women, or I believe you're going to be interview number 20. And I have spoken to so many that had inspiring stories to share. And I was just want to say yours definitely ranks high on the
Thank you.
inspiring women category. And
Thank
so
you.
just so glad I've had the opportunity to speak with you. And thank you so much for what you've shared today. And I'm sure anyone that listens to this, they too will be inspired and just be ready to do all that they can do for in terms of serving the Lord and
Yes.
finding their purpose and being that willing vessel, that we're to be, so that God can use us. So again, thank you so much for those words of inspiration, for sharing your story.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
may I say something too? I have an identical twin. She's an Army veteran. Okay.
Okay.
And we have 3 cats like our children. Okay. And I need to say our grandfather was a sometimes a preacher's kid. He was the baby of 12 children, AME.
Mm.
And so we've been Methodists all our lives. But that's the way God put it. But I wanted to add, and I want to thank you so much for even reaching out to me. I count it a privilege and a blessing. Okay.
Yes. All right. Yeah, well, again, it was certainly a blessing to me to have you join us today. And so I just want to say to those listening and viewing, thank you so much for being here. And so until next time, may you be well, be encouraged, and I invite you to be back here for another 30 minutes with. All
Thank
right.
you.
God bless you.
God bless.